Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the wives of David. In Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 9, Solomon, David's son, by Bathsheba, wrote, Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given you under the sun. This is your reward in life, and in your toil which you have labored under the sun. Notice the definite article, the woman. To have one woman to share your life with, that's the gift God has given you. And you should enjoy that gift and be comforted in that gift. Of course, Solomon did not have one wife, neither did David. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. We don't know how many wives David had. 8 are named. We know a little bit about 4, a lot about 3. We're going to study those 4. Um, um, and um, and we also mentioned yesterday that we don't know how many wives David actually had, because we're told when he took Jerusalem, the city of the Jebusites, he took other wives and concubines. And of course, the concubines had something of a wifely status and were considered widows when parted from their husband or the man with whom they were concubines. And so um, immediately, David is not following God's plan. Solomon, although God permits it, in fact, God says in 2 Samuel chapter 12, if you'd wanted more wives, I'd have given you more wives. Um, God permits it, but it is not part of God's design for a man to have more than one wife. And of course, as we'll discuss at the end of this, that brought David a lot of grief, his own choices in this way. As we said yesterday, his relationship to his wives, his concubines, and his daughters, which we've already demonstrated, quite problematic. He's not in any way an example, a positive example for any man. He has moments that are admirable, and we'll see those, but not generally speaking. Solomon also wrote, or the compiler wrote, in Proverbs, the Holy Spirit wrote, in Proverbs chapter 5, verse 18, that we should take joy in the wife of our youth. The wife of David's youth is Michal, Saul's younger daughter. Saul had 5 children, 3 sons, Jonathan being the oldest, and then after the 3 sons were born, 2 daughters, Merab and Michal. Michal is his younger daughter and the baby of his family. Saul promises David Merab to begin with, but then doesn't give her to David. David is very humble at this point in his life about all of this, and it says, "Who am I that I would be included in the king's family?" But then Saul finds out, and Saul at this point is not just suspicious of David. He wants David dead because he knows David is going to replace him on the throne. He hears that his daughter Michal loves David. And in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, the rabbis, 200 BC, chose the word agape to use here. And they don't use that word cavalierly, they use it sparingly. Michal loved David. She's a young woman, 14, 15 years old, and she is completely enamored of this young man, not much older than her, who is this war hero and who is this sweet singer and this musician and who is so humble and who is such a friend of her oldest brothers, and who serves God so faithfully. So Saul hears this and he thinks, great, she loves him. I'll give her to him. But the bride price is going to be 100 foreskins of the Philistines. David has to go kill 100 Philistines and bring that piece of tissue back. That's the bride price, thinking that David will die in the effort. Well, David doesn't die in the effort. And so David marries Michal. And almost immediately, David has to flee Jerusalem because Saul is trying to kill him. And when this happens, and Saul sends his agents to David's and Michal's house, Michal finds out about it, and she's the one who has agency to save her husband's life. Saul sent messengers. This is 1 Samuel 19, verse 11. to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your own life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went out and fled and escaped. And Michal took the household idol, that's problematic, and laid it on the bed and put a quilt of goat's hair at its head and covered it with clothes. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he's sick. And Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, bring him to me on his bed, that I may put him to death. And the messengers entered the house, and behold, the idol was on the bed with the quilt of goat's hair at its head. And Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this? So David and Michal are parted at this point and are not reunited until after David becomes king. David is on the run for many years from Saul, and he has a band of 600 men, and they are a guerrilla force, and they protect the southwestern frontier of Israel. At the same time, they're trying to flee Saul, and it is during that time that David marries Ahinoam and Abigail. And in the passage that tells us he married those two women, tells us that Saul had given Michal to a man named Paltiel, um, and that's where she stays for years and years. When David takes the throne, um, uh, and he's ruling the southern part of the kingdom, Saul and Jonathan are dead, but Saul's general Abner and Saul's son Ishbosheth are still alive, and they're still controlling the northern part. David is such, they're trying to placate David, and David insists on getting Michal back, not because he loves her, but because she's his property, and he says, I want her back. And David sends messengers, 2 Samuel 3, verse 14, give me my wife Michal, to whom I was betrothed for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. I paid for her. I paid bride price. She's my property. I want her back. Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. The Bible calls Paltiel her husband. That's important. And from Paltiel the son of Laish. Her husband went with her, weeping as he went, and followed her as far as Bahurim, which is kind of the borderland. Abner, the general, says, go home. So he went home. It's so sad what happens. The only other time, so she's taken from a man who loves her. She was taken from the man she loved by her father, taken from a man who loves her by the man who paid for her. And the only time we read about her again is a few pages later when the ark returns to Jerusalem and David is dancing before the ark. And Michal sees him doing it, and she's so resentful of him. And she says to David, how the king of Israel distinguished himself today, uncovering himself in the eyes of his servants' maids, as one of the foolish and shameless ones uncovers himself. What a big man you were today, dancing around and showing your underwear to the young maidens. Yeah, you were really kingly today. Um, it's so sad because when she was a young maiden, she loved this man. And she's had no agency, really. The only time she exercised agency was to save his life. Um, and he took her from the man who loved her because she was his property. And this is all we know of her is this resentment. And David's answer, it says a lot about David. I don't think we pay attention to what David says. David says, it was before Yahweh who chose me above your father and above his house to appoint me ruler over all the people, over Israel. Therefore, I will celebrate before Yahweh, and I will be more lightly esteemed than this, and will be humble in my own eyes. Before God, I am the lowest of the low. But with the maids whom you have spoken, with them I will be distinguished. Before God, I'm the lowest of the low. But I tell you this, I'm better than your dad. I tell you something else. If the young girls are going to admire me, they're going to admire me. That's what he said. That's what took place between this husband and wife, and that's the last we know of Michal. talk about Abigail next time. I've taken up more than 10 minutes of your time today. Should have made this 2 sessions, but I didn't know how to split it up. Thank you for joining me for what is now 10 good minutes with the Word.